Now I'm live. Yay! Okay. Sorry for the delay, everyone. I don't know what happened, but it said it was not going to stream to LinkedIn, which means we had to change last minute the link to join us. And I don't know if you'll be able to get on or not. So be happy to watch the recording. You don't know what's going on. I'm so very sorry, but it is streaming live right now to LinkedIn and to YouTube and to Lauren's channels, LinkedIn and YouTube. So hopefully you will find us. This is one of the most important LinkedIn Lives I've ever done. We have gotten some really great information for HR professionals, for job seekers, but honestly, we are tired as HR pros. We have done it all. We step up to the plate. We're always saying, yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. And we're raising our hands and we're everywhere we can possibly be. And we are tired. And Lauren is wonderful. She's like your best friend you didn't even know that you needed or that you had. She's reading your mind. You don't even know that she's reading your mind. She has solutions to all of those things. Stop saying yes and still get the results that you're looking for. So let me introduce to you Lauren, who is going to share with us today different ways that we can approach all of that information. Thanks, Lauren.
What an amazing introduction. Thank you, Christine. Yeah, it's so funny when there's a snag. We were just talking before we started that about last night I went live on my own and I was talking for 5 minutes before I realized I wasn't actually live, that I had pressed the live button, it had done something, and then it never started me live. So
technology.
I love it. I love it because HR people in particular, I think we really like to get it right. We really like to make it perfect. And when it's not, what I think is so important is like, how do you recover from that? Do you live in it forever? We had a moment of back and forth and then you reset it up and here we are. And I just love that. I love when things aren't perfect because it's every time it's a lesson for me. I have that like initial automatic reaction of like, I did something wrong. I don't know it couldn't be your fault. I did it wrong. And then like, okay, now how do we move forward from here and still have fun with it?
Exactly. I think everyone gets permission to wallow in your failures, to say, you know what, I'm not good enough. I'm bad. And I've done, horrible things or whatever. But you only get a very short period of time to do that and reflect negatively. And then you have to get yourself up, dust yourself off and say, how do we move forward from this? Okay, I screwed up. That's fine. But what do I need to do to step over that mistake and move forward to fix things? Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And I love the word wallow because I think we don't give ourselves permission to do that. And I remember times that I've stood in the mirror on the verge of tears because something didn't go right or something, I messed something up for someone else or I couldn't help everybody or I couldn't get all of the work done. And I can remember standing in the mirror saying to myself, like, get it together, right? Like so mad at myself. I would never do that to anybody else. And so learning
we are much harder on ourselves. And so that internal speak, you are exactly correct. Because we hold ourselves to the bar way up here and we hold everyone else a little bit lower or a lot lower.
Nobody else has to be perfect as long as I am.
Yes, absolutely. You got it.
Yes.
So I don't know who's joining us, but I hope that you were able to find us. We had a little glitch for our IT kind of thing. And so we picked ourselves up, dusted ourselves off, and we are moving right along. So thank you so much. If you were able to find us and join our conversation, Lauren is going to give you wonderful tips for overcoming the fine factor and I'm okay factor. What did I say to Lauren? How are you? Oh, I'm okay. And I looked at him like, no, I mean, I'm fine. Like, I think it's just like an automatic thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my tagline for my company is fine as a trap. And it is the thing that we say we are because we don't want to break down. We don't want to wallow. We don't want to admit that things aren't a-okay, because as HR, very often we're known for our positivity. We're known for comforting people. We're known for making sure that everything and everyone is okay and compliant and in order. And so we've got to be fine, even if on the inside we're not.
I almost think that being fine or being okay or not wallowing, you don't want to see. I mean, there was a commercial, don't let them see you sweat.
Yes.
And you don't want to wallow because it's showing that you are a human being. You don't want to cry in front of somebody else because it's showing that you're weak. And in this market, when there's so many jobs, but yet job seekers are really struggling to land, you're starting to give that negative connotation to others on the outside. What do you think about that?
I, as you're talking about this, I'm remembering a specific situation. I had gone to a doctor's appointment and I had gotten news I didn't want. It wasn't bad news. It was just news I didn't want. And an employee came into my office and said, "Do you have a minute?" Which is, you know, that's the HR 30 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And,
at least, yeah.
And I said, "Sure, come on in. You know, come on in. I can help." Right. And I had just gotten back from what felt like a hard moment. And she came in and she said, "Can I close the door?" I said, "Sure." She closed the door and she was like, "Oh, thanks so much for meeting with me. How you doing?" And I burst into tears, which was very unlike me. And I wasn't particularly close to this employee. And I wasn't, she wasn't somebody I confided in. And I was having a moment. And she said, what happened? Are you okay? And I said, "I'm fine." I'm crying in these like very unexpected tears, which are always harder than the tears you're working on holding back. And I said, and she said, "You're not fine, Lauren." Like, what is happening? And so I told her what had just happened. And I said, like, "I really am going to be okay. I think I was just caught off guard by you asking how I am." Because when people come to us in HR, they're not often asking how we are. They are in their own stuff, right? They're coming to us for help.
Yeah.
And so we're expected to say we're fine. We're expected to act like we're fine. Of course we're fine. Everything's fine, right? And we have a comment from David who says HR is very good at hiding what's really going on in the company. It's really like what's going on in our heads, right?
I was just going to say that. Is it just the company? I mean, David's right. We're always hiding, so to speak, what's going on in the company, but we're also even more so hiding what's going on in our own heads, in our own lives. Is that not accurate?
Yeah. And it speaks to the title of our conversation, which is, we know boundaries exist. We just don't think they exist for us. So in that moment with that employee, I could have said, "You know what? I actually need 15 minutes, but if you come back, or can we set something up for later today?" I didn't have to tell her why. I didn't have to tell her, you know, and it was actually a relief to talk to somebody about it. She wouldn't have been my choice, but there we were. But I didn't have the boundaries in place at that point in time. I didn't have.
How do you know you need boundaries such as that? How do you know that you need to maybe give yourself permission for the 15 minutes of collecting yourself and your thoughts and your stressors before you can give of yourself to somebody else?
Yeah. So I think we'll probably talk about this more, but
sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
No, I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm with you. When I work with my clients, I work with HR people. I work with people in all industries, but I work with HR people. And what I find in particular with HR people is that we are always reacting. We are always trying to fix what's going on. We're protecting, we're helping, we're in the room. And we're always moving pieces around. So the first step is to actually notice that we don't have any boundaries, to notice what's going on around us, to notice that we're always saying yes often to our detriment, to notice that we're raising our hands and saying like, I'll do it, I'll be in the room, to notice when we're in a lane that's actually not our lane. We're just good at stuff. So people invite us into the room, which I'm sure you've had, I've had. That's like, a career long thing for a lot of HR people,
yes.
right? Is like, hey, I remember one time they were redoing the phone tree at work. And they said, will you come to the meeting? And I was like, learning my boundaries at that point in time. And I said, I don't think you need me in there. And then after the meeting was over, the CEO came to my office and he said, I'm so sorry. I think we forgot to invite you to that meeting. And I said, no, I actually declined it. And he was like, oh, really? I thought we needed you in there. So I think the first step is really just noticing, right? We always jump to fixing. That's our MO. We know how to fix things. But for ourselves, there's nothing to fix if we don't notice that something is wrong. So it's noticing where we don't have boundaries. And one of the tools that I use with my clients, and I love this tool because it is so eye-opening, is that I have them create a piece of paper, and they can do it on the computer or they can do it on hard paper, whatever works for them. And to write on one side, my responsibility, not my responsibility. And to keep track for a day or 3 days of everything that gets asked of them or everything they jump in to do. And to write down, I did that thing. Was it my responsibility or not my responsibility? Answer to benefits question, my responsibility. Went into this project meeting, not my responsibility. And then go back after you've audited that, after you've just kept track of it, just noticed it, and add up how much time you spent on things that were not actually your responsibility. Don't do anything about it, right? But just notice, how much time are you spending saying yes to things that don't actually belong to you?
So let me ask you, Lauren, we read a lot of articles and posts about how we can kind of get ahead in the HR world or the management world, or be respected as having a seat at the table and all of those things. How is setting a boundary beneficial to doing and raising your hand and volunteering for all those other things, so that you do get noticed and you do get the recognition that you are seeking or deserving? How do you find that balance? I don't quite understand what many of our listeners may need to do.
Yeah. I think there's this sort of mountain we think we're climbing, right? So if you picture this incline, like sort of the first half of a bell curve, right? You're climbing, you're volunteering for things, you get invited into rooms, it's very flattering. You get promoted and you keep everything you have plus all the new stuff.
Exactly.
Right? And up you go, more responsibility, more recognition, more stuff to do. And then at some point, that bulk of stuff you have is too big a collection to keep going. Mm-hmm. So, and you also don't get as excited about it anymore, right? There's this shift. And so I see that like this climb up and then this big like dive off a cliff. Yes. Where you don't want it anymore. Stop inviting me to things I don't want. And you don't know how to back out of it because you've never set boundaries before. And so the powerful thing, it doesn't feel like it feels counterintuitive, but the powerful thing is actually to pull back and say, here's what I can do. Here's what I can't do. I have an Instagram account, and on there, I have a reel where I talk about, 17 ways to say no. Right. And it's, in some ways it's, oh, I don't have the bandwidth for that, or I can't do it now, but I can do it later. And it gets sort of progressively intense to the point where it's like, no, and I can't believe you'd have the audacity to ask me that. Right. But we don't get to that because we have trained people to rely on us. We've trained people to come to us. We've trained people to ask us to be in the room, to ask us to be on the project. We've said yes every time. And we think that everybody forgets we also have other work. And that if we say no to their thing, we're going to come across as lazy or disengaged or setting a bad example.
You're reading my mind again. Stop doing that. I mean, I'm looking at Paul's comment here. Great to keep track of things that aren't your responsibility. I do that. I keep track of everything, just like you had said, that, you know, circle and circle. But at the same time, I get to cross something off, but I'm adding 3 or 4 more things to the end of that list. So the list is constantly there and it's constantly going. And that makes it so much harder to say no, just like you said.
Yeah.
Like, where does that come from?
So there are next steps, right? So noticing is the first step. Noticing when you've had the pileup of work. And I remember early in my HR career when not having enough to do because I was learning, right? So everything that got added was filling my time and making me feel fulfilled and making me feel important. And then I hit a point, you know, around the manager, director level where I was like, oh, no more things, right? And in some cases, there wasn't anybody to hand things off to.
Okay.
And in other cases, I wasn't handing things off. So the next step in my 3-step program, which is easy peasy, right? There's like 100 steps under the 3 steps. But first you notice, then you decide, then you do. And as HR people, we are so used to just diving into doing.
Yes.
So it's looking at that list of my responsibility, not my responsibility. It's looking at lists of what do I want to do? What do I not want to do? It's looking at lists of who else is here who can handle this stuff. Why do I get called into the room? Why am I the only person who knows how to mediate a conversation? Maybe I need to teach some people how to mediate conversations. Maybe we need to hire more people.
You just said that, Lauren. That is absolutely perfect because part of me is feeling like, okay, we're not only reading HR getting a seat at the table and all these posts on how to make your job easier and better, but we're also reading articles and posts about mentoring and teaching a different generation or a generation the same as yours on how to do part of your job and take those bits and pieces away. But you really have to relinquish that control. And sometimes that could be hard for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why that middle step is so important. It's a decision-making process, right?
Okay.
You start really noticing what's bogging you down, what you don't enjoy. And look, if I could get rid of every piece of work that I don't enjoy, that would be amazing. But that's not real life. Real life is like, you got to do a 401k audit every year. And you
mean
know,
that like work? You mean work?
Yeah, the work, right? But if the balance is that more of your work doesn't excite you than does, then either you're in the wrong job or you're not setting the boundaries that you need to be setting. You're not delegating the way that you need to delegate. You're not asking for help the way that you could. So that decision point, that notice, decide, do, the decision making and not just the reacting and doing is so important so that you can get clear in your head. What do I need to reprioritize? What decision do I need to make to go talk to my leader, the next leader in line or the leader's leader and get buy-in for me handing some stuff off? Where do I need to delegate to somebody else? Where do I need to say, I know I've been coming to these meetings for 2 years, but like, I just need to, revamp the social media policy if that's what you need me to do. I don't need to be in the social media strategy meetings anymore.
Okay.
And so it's really getting deliberate about noticing where you are and where your time is going. I've also had clients do a time audit where every half hour they write down for themselves, not for anybody else, what they spent the last half hour doing. And sometimes you learn that your day is filled with people asking you if you have a minute that's 30 minutes.
Yes.
So do you set up office hours? Do you set boundaries around that? Yes, I do. I have a minute. I actually have 5 minutes, but I'm going to have to call this at 5 minutes. So if we need more time than that, we'll schedule something for later. Right?
I love that. That's a great suggestion. And I love the suggestion of the every half hour, just write for yourself what you've been doing to help you better keep track, because sometimes the day gets away from us, just like those conversations. Can I have a minute? And it turns into that 30-minute conversation. And what have you been doing all day? What have you been doing all this time?
Yeah. And you don't want to overreact in a way that makes you cold, right? You have an employee
Right.
walk into your office
Right.
crying. You don't want to say like, I've got 5 and then you're out of here. But at the same time, a lot of the things are, I have a question about my benefits, which turns into my whole team needs training and I need this and we're short staffed and we, and so if it's going to be a real discussion, let's set up time. And if your calendar is full, then time doesn't come today. Time comes another day. Okay. And all of this is practice, right? You're not going to flip a switch one day and say like, suddenly I have boundaries. It's going to be a shock to your system. It's only going to last a day. It's like going to the gym.
You're not going to fix us all today. Come on. You got 1 hour.
I know. Sorry for the little dip into realism. But it's a start. And if you're auditing your time, you get to see, where do you lose time? Mm-hmm. Where do you have breaks, right? I can remember days and weeks and months where I felt like I didn't even have a 5-minute break.
I was going to ask you about that. What do you mean by break? What exactly is a break?
Yeah. So you know how you close your office door when there's somebody in your office? Mm-hmm. You can also do that when there's nobody in your office. I know. If you don't have an office door, I know. If you don't have an office door, you can stand up and walk outside. You can go to the restroom. If there's like really no place to go, put yourself in a stall and breathe for 3 minutes, right? There's an aspect of self-care that we forget about and that we think comes secondary to everything else. But if I'm forgetting to breathe all day, every day, one day I'm going to break down and say, I can't do this anymore. If I'm giving myself pockets of time, even if they're small pockets of time, to say no, right? And Paul says it in
I was
in
just
going
to say, Paul is saying
great comment.
Things.
Paul, it's like, we hired you to come into the conversation. Learning to say no can be very freeing to do the things that we are most effective and impactful at doing. It's the old put on your oxygen mask first so you can help other people, right? We are only as good as our energy. So if we're in burnout, if we are so tired, if we have no boundaries, we're going to end up being mediocre and working twice as hard at everything as if we have some boundaries and we're doing less, but doing it more impactfully, more effectively, then our impact actually gets seen more, right? So for a long time, I was, Lauren will do it, right? I was the vice president of whatever you need. Eventually, when I started setting boundaries, there was a period of time where people said to me, and I had to be prepared for, don't you do this? Isn't this your job?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I was told the wrong manager by mistake, and I'm like, wait a minute, that what? Huh? Yeah, no. And yeah, that's exactly what ends up happening because people don't know any different. They just, that's the go-to person, just like you said.
Yeah. And so becoming the not go-to person, there's a decision-making process there too. When you start looking at what's my responsibility, what's not my responsibility, look for the low stakes decisions, look for the low risk decisions, right? Look for the people who, when you say no to them, they're probably going to be pretty cool about it. As opposed to the very tough person who's always blaming everybody for everything, who's then going to, say, well,
I don't know who you want to do anything anymore. About.
No, I've never worked with people like that, but I've heard that there are people.
Anybody like that.
Yeah. And everybody works a little bit differently in how they want to address it. But I remember when, my history is that I worked in HR for 20 years. I loved working in HR for 15 of those years. And the last 5 years, I was so deep into interim managing everything, into working 80 to 100-hour work weeks that like I could barely breathe. I couldn't get anything done. And setting boundaries just seemed absolutely impossible. And I was coaching people. as a side gig at that point in time. Now I run the business as a full-time gig, but I was coaching people, and I had this very like martyrdom kind of attitude of like, I can help other people get what they want and live vicariously through them, but I can't have it because like I'm too busy. And I say that a little bit in jest now, but I fully believed it at the time. And I was living it. I was proving to everybody around me that I was indispensable. And the first time that I said no to something, somebody emailed me and said, hey, can you do this thing? And I emailed him back because I knew he was a nice guy. I emailed him back and I said, oh, actually, that belongs to this person. You can go ahead and ask him to do it and he will take care of it. And it was somebody I was managing. And he emailed me back. I sat with my heart pounding. I kept hitting send receive on my Outlook because I knew he was going to come back and say something, whether it was like, okay, or, you know, isn't this your job? And he came back with, isn't this your job? And it was gentler than that. It was like, oh, I feel like I've come to you for this before. Is this not something you do? I thought it was something you did. And I read it in a tone, right? There was no tone to it, but I read it in a tone like, isn't this what you do? And I paused and I emailed him back and I said, I think I have done this for you before, but it actually belongs to this other person. I know he knows how to do it, so you'll be in good hands. And then I send receive, hit refresh. And I got back, cool, thanks. And cool, thanks lives in my brain to this day. And that was years ago. And it lives in my brain to this day because people just want to know. They want to know who's my go-to person, who handles this, who can help me. What do I do if I don't know? Cool, thanks.
So let me ask you, the person that should have gotten that request, the request went to you, you bounced it back. Did he, I feel like maybe they didn't even ask, one, because they thought it was your job, but two, knowing that you might be more methodical or responsible to get it done as opposed to that other person.
I had established myself as the person who just knew how to do things.
Okay.
And the truth is, we're all making it up. Nobody knows how to do anything. We just, like, some of us are good at figuring it out, right? So because I had established myself as the person who knew how to do things, people just came to me. And if I like thought I knew how to do it, I would just do it. A lot of the time they could have done it themselves.
Okay.
But they didn't know. They didn't know how, or they didn't know who their person was to go to. So if I got asked, I did it. Right. And so I think being thoughtful, noticing when things come to you that aren't yours, and the thing he needed got handled by the person who did the thing. And the next time it came my way, that kind of thing came my way, I said, oh, that belongs to this person. Go ahead and give it to them. It actually was empowering for the people who reported to me because then they got to really own their jobs, right? Exactly. I wasn't delegating and they got to really own their jobs. Not just
mentorship. It was throwing your all hands on deck kind of thing. And let's see what you can do and prove to me that you can do it. I'm wondering if what you are describing is a time blocking situation, as Paul mentioned. Is it a matter of carving out time for you, carving out time for the request, carving out time for your responsibilities? Is this just another term for what you discussed?
So time blocking is a methodology that works for some people. Some people really like to work in structure. And if you really like to work in structure and you value this hour or that hour or this afternoon, then yes, time blocking is for you. Neurodivergent people either love or hate time blocking. And so there's no one size fits all solution. Like, you really have to figure out what works for you. And I would love to talk next about like not being alone in figuring that out. But time blocking works for some people. For other people, it's set an alarm on your phone. with a
Okay.
question. How long have I been sitting here?
Okay.
Right? Do it today at 2:00, do it tomorrow at 10, do it the next day at 5 p.m. You know, if you are a person who likes variety and some spontaneity, time blocking is not going to feel good to you, because the whole rest of your day is scheduled meetings and people coming in and needing you and all of that. So if you're time blocking, I am a person who, I don't love time blocking. I find the blank space of a time block very overwhelming.
So let me ask you this, Lauren. I mean, if we are, okay, setting the alarm, 10 o'clock comes and I am knee deep in the middle of something and I'm on a roll and I'm on a streak and that alarm went off. Is that necessarily a good thing, or it depends on if you are neurodivergent or if you are embracing the whole time? Like, how would that, do you just kind of turn off the alarm and keep on working, or do you say, okay, I've spent 4 hours on this and now it's time to move on and it will keep until later or tomorrow or whatever?
Yes, it's a yes and. It's a
We
matter
are not
of,
in theater, okay?
yeah. Let's improv this. Let's play.
Yeah, no improv here.
It depends, right? And which is such a frustrating answer to give. But if you are in HR and you find yourself working from the second you wake up until the moment you go to bed, and that doesn't necessarily mean you're sitting at a computer, right?
Mhm.
A lot of my clients come in and I say to them, how many hours do you work a week? And they say, like 50. And I say, oh, okay, tell me about your day. What time do you wake up? And what's the first thing you do? Well, as I'm walking to the bathroom, I check my phone to see what my calendar looks like for the day. Okay, so you start working the second you wake up, right? And are you thinking about it? And are you taking phone calls while you're making coffee and all, right? And so your workday extends because you're doing all of this stuff. And as HR people, we get into this routine of being responsive all the time.
Mhm.
So we have to try different things. Test out a time block. Test out 2 hours where you're not taking calls, you're not taking anything. If your calendars are shared, it's set to private appointment, which is not that unusual in HR. Like if you and I are having a confidential meeting, I might set that as a private appointment.
Right.
So that people don't know, like, oh, Christine is in Lauren's office. I wonder what's going on there.
Mhm.
So it's reasonable to have some appointments set to private.
Right.
And if you find that that was overwhelming, I didn't know what to do with my time, I ended up just filling it with responding to emails, so I was working for other people anyway, then maybe that's not for you. If you set an alarm and you're right deep in the middle of something or an emergency has come up, reset that alarm for later. Or if the alarm system doesn't work for you and it's not prompting you and it's not motivating you to stand up and walk over to the window and breathe for a minute, right? Even that little break is something that we don't naturally do. Then you try something else. If you're doing a time audit, if you're doing half-hour increments of what took my time today, maybe at the end of the day, you have a list of questions for yourself. When did I have breathing room? When did I take breaks? When did I need a break, but I didn't take one?
I like how Paul suggested the time blocking. You suggested something different and setting an alarm or whatever happens to be, because there are so many different people that are listening in, that what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another person, but yet they can still get the benefit of that work time versus clear my mind time versus saying no.
Yeah. And I have a tool that is I think really helpful for that self-auditing, which if you go to findasatrap.com, which is the easiest place to find me, you can download this tool, and it asks you about like what you do for a living, how your coworkers are, how your time is spent, all of that kind of stuff. And then it allows you to evaluate, like, do you enjoy that? Do you not enjoy that? Is it fine? Which isn't really fine, but is it fine? And like, what's the balance? What does it look like? Are you actually like enjoying your day, your career, your job, your coworkers, the culture, the company culture, the environment? When you get your paycheck, are you like, oh, This is it. Or are you thinking like, well, at least I get paid a bunch of work for a bunch of money for all of this work. And it gives you this opportunity to really just sort of self-audit your job and how it's going. I think the baseline issue for us with setting boundaries is that we don't even notice. And we just sort of put ourselves into this big bucket of, I don't know how to set boundaries. And like I said, it's not a switch. You don't wake up one day and say, now I'm a boundary setter.
Yes.
Because you can't maintain that. You start with setting really low stakes boundaries. I gave that example of picking up your phone the second you wake up. I keep my phone now on Do Not Disturb until 8:30 in the morning. And the reminder for me, I have an iPhone, you get that little crescent moon that says that you're in focus mode or Do Not Disturb mode. When I pick up my phone in the morning, which I still do automatically, it's burned into my brain that you wake up, you pick up your phone. I don't check my work email. I don't check my text messages. The people who are allowed to text me or call me while my phone's in Do Not Disturb are my nearest and dearest, and they will only come through in an emergency. Okay. And they know not to text me at 3:00 in the morning, right? And so for me, for this was one of the things I did when I started setting boundaries. And for this client who I'm talking about, who woke up in the morning and started checking right away, for me, it was setting a 15-minute timer. When I woke up, the only thing I was allowed to do on my phone was set a 15-minute timer. I needed something in my hands, right? Because it's like quitting any habit or addiction that you need to occupy yourself with something else. So I also had a book handy, and I made myself read for 15 minutes. With this client, she could only handle 5 minutes, and that was okay. And with her 5 minutes, she made her cup of coffee without also looking at her phone. She watched her cup of coffee get made.
I think that's interesting how you are comparing it to habit, because it is a habit. It's like, okay, January 1st, I'm going to lose 90 pounds. And how many people get out of the routine because of bad habits within the first 2 weeks of the new year? Because they are not ingrained. It's not ingrained. It's not baby steps. It's like cold turkey, and it's so hard to maintain. Some people are very successful, but it's a very small percentage. Mm-hmm. And taking it, what you're saying, to be baby steps, to just try the orders out and see, and then incorporate one thing at a time, I think will prove successes wholeheartedly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had one client who wanted to start a journaling practice. And so her break at work was 10 minutes of journaling. She set a time on her calendar, and she set aside 15 minutes so that she could breathe for 5 minutes and then journal for 10 minutes. She came back to me and she said, and I said, how's it going? And she said, I hate it, and I gave it up after 2 days. And I said, great, because that's also a success. Yes. To learn what doesn't work for you is a success. Mm-hmm. To learn what isn't serving you and try something else is the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And to stick to a habit because that's what you decided you were going to do it's not better than not having boundaries, to have a boundary that you don't like.
Right.
And what she realized was she actually wanted to do it at the end of the day. So before she closed down her computer and shut off her lights, for the last 10 minutes of the day, she journaled. And it worked for her. And then she left her journal at work so that it wasn't staring at her when she got home. And every day at the end of the day, before she walked out, she committed to 10 minutes of journaling, and it worked. And not everybody likes that. I hate journaling, and I love writing, but journaling doesn't serve me the way that I imagine romantically it should serve me. Sitting on a couch and listening to classical music and writing in my notebook and some romantic script that I have terrible handwriting. And so we all have different things that work for us. And
do you think that setting boundaries has something to do with the envy of somebody else. Like, oh, they did XYZ and I want to do that. They climbed Mount Everest and I want to climb Mount Everest just like them. And there's nowhere that it's not going to happen. And you don't really want it. So the whole boundaries, the saying no thing, the like, how bad do you really want to do those things before you set up boundaries, before you commit to changing a habit that's not doing you any good?
Yeah. I think you have to figure out what you don't want before you figure out what you want.
Okay.
And so if you say, I want to climb Mount Everest, right? That sounds terrible, by the way. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, to me too.
But if you say, I want to climb Mount Everest.
Because I know Paul just wrote a book and I'm like, wow, I would love to write a book, but I do not have the patience. I don't have the habits. And yeah, journaling at the end of the day for 10 minutes, yeah, maybe that would work for me. But I'm trying to figure out, like, I don't know if I have a boundary like Paul did. Like, I don't know if I could do that. Good for you, Paul, by the way. You're just, that's amazing to me. And I don't think that
you got to add the word yet, right? You're not going to start climbing Mount Everest today, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the question is, what's the first step? And often, as a lot of HR people are high achievers, and that's what my client base is. And that's me. So it's not like I picked this stranger audience. I picked people like me. But when we're high achievers, we say, okay, I'm going to climb Mount Everest. I'm going to start with walking 10 miles a day. Well, that's not a start. If you've been sitting on your couch, that's not a start. So it's working backwards from there. I love the question, what's the step before that? For me, that's such a good tool. And I was recently doing a workshop for professionals, and we were talking about, let's say that you do have a goal of walking, building a walking routine. What's the first step? And they came up with, a mile a day. Okay, cool. So walking a mile a day. If you haven't walked at all, how long do you think it's going to take you to walk a mile a day? I don't know, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Okay, cool. So is the first step walking a mile a day, or is the first step finding time in your calendar so that you have 20, 25 minutes a day to walk? Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, cool. What's before that? What do you need before that? And what we actually came down to was, do you have socks and shoes? If you've been wearing dress shoes to work for many years and you've not been out walking or exercising for a long time, how old are your sneakers? Is the rubber going to literally crack when you put your sneakers on? So maybe the first step is actually finding shoes. And so often we dive into what we think we need to do. And we don't do it because we haven't actually completed the steps before the step we said we were going to do, we were going to commit to. So when you're boundary setting, when you're rejiggering your schedule, when you're figuring out what job you want next, when you're figuring out how to take control of a new habit, it's asking yourself, like, what is the smallest impactful step I can take that will get me closer to Mount Everest? Okay. Is it going to REI and looking at backpacks? Maybe it is. Right?
I like that, taking a step back where you think that starting to walk 10 miles a day would get you closer, and it will, but then what is the step before that and before that and before that, to keep breaking it down so that you can do maybe 2 baby steps. Maybe I can buy socks and shoes on the same shopping trip before we start to walk. And because we are overachievers and we won't do one thing one day.
Exactly.
But I do like being able to break it down, and that does take some brainstorming, figuring out all those ideas.
Yeah. And it takes like a start of a small desire to pay attention to yourself. We give and we give and we give. And the HR career, so many of us get into it because we like helping people, right?
Right.
And the most strategic HR people will say, like, it's not about helping people, it's about strategic company management and blah, 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 blah. But we know, and I know, I can say for sure I got into HR because I liked helping people.
Right.
Then I fell in love with the strategic side, but that's not why I got into it. And we think that what we need is less important than what we can provide to other people.
That is so true.
And you hit a point where that just doesn't work anymore. You're going to burn out. You're going to start hating your career. I have clients who have fallen way back in love with HR because they decided they hated it. They needed to do something else. They get me into a different career, Lauren. And when it came down to it, it wasn't about the career. It wasn't about the job. It was about us, right? It's about us. And it's about boundary setting. And a lot of my clients fall back in love with HR when they have the right boundaries. I had one client who was on the people side of HR, and she like looked over the fence longingly at the operations side of HR. And she thought, well, this is where I'm stuck. And her company was big enough that it had an operations side and a people side of HR. And she said, well, this was the path I chose. This is where I had to go. And she felt like she had said all of the things to her manager about what she liked, what she didn't like. And really she hadn't. She just thought about them a lot and felt bitter about them. And when she finally sat down with her manager and got brave and got courageous enough to go and say, every time I'm working on like back end people stuff, I'm happy. And then when I'm sitting with people, I feel like all I want to do is get back to the back end work.
Right.
What might be the opportunity for me to move to the operations side? And he said, your timing is great. We're adding an operations manager position, an HR operations manager position. Let's interview you for it. And they did. And she moved over there and she fell back in love with the company. She fell back in love with the work because now she was getting to do the side of HR that she actually really loved. And she had predictability, which was something that she really valued. She had some repetition, which she really liked. She had some strategic work, which she really enjoyed. And she didn't have people popping into her office and saying, do you have a minute? She didn't like that. It didn't work for her as a career. Me, I thrived on that. I loved being interrupted when I was in HR. I love when my clients reach out to me spontaneously and say, hey, do you have 5 minutes? I love that. That's my favorite part. But it didn't work for her. She's still with that company 5 years later because she asked for what she needed. And her manager said to her, I had no idea that you wanted this. I'm so glad you said something. I had no idea that you didn't want to speak up in this particular way in meetings. I had no idea that you didn't want to participate in the people side of things.
I think that's very interesting that it turned out that way for her. Are you seeing a lot of that happen because people are doing that self-reflection and they're figuring out what they don't want to get to what they do want, to be courageous to speak up and set those boundaries?
Yeah, I think so. I remember when I started working with my first coach, she had me fill out a questionnaire, which I do with all of my new clients as well. And she asked a lot of questions about what I wanted. And I looked back about 6 months later, and it was all things I didn't want. I had no idea what I wanted because my mind was so filled with the things I didn't want that I hadn't given myself the space to figure out what I wanted. And
is there a timeline for that to figure out what you do want, what you don't want, or is it kind of, it depends?
Usually with my clients, we usually knock out what you don't want in one session.
Okay.
What you do want is a lot broader. I'm working with a client right now who was a recruiter for 20 years, moved into another company. They stopped recruiting for a while and they put her into basically like a project management, project lead kind of role.
Right.
And she is realizing she doesn't actually like the company. She doesn't know what she wants to do. We've been doing this audit of every single thing she does. And then she's rating it. Do I like it? Do I love it? Or do I hate it?
Mm-hmm.
And now we're working on what other jobs are there that fall into the categories of the things you love to do. And we haven't really gotten there yet, but what I see for her are chief operations positions, chief administrative officer type of positions, the people management. Maybe you're managing a recruiting team and not doing, recruiting, like the direct recruiting. And hopefully she doesn't watch this, because I don't want to give away all the secrets. I want her to do some self-discovery, but
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah. And she's also been taking coaching education. And so do you become an executive coach inside of a company if you don't want to start your own company? There's so much opportunity. There's so many different things that we can do. There's so many different jobs, and we get so sort of single focused in what we do. But for me, one of the first steps in boundary setting is it's that noticing. What do you not want to be doing? What do you hate? What bogs you down? What are the things that you put off and put off and put off until your manager says, Christine, where is it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. And is that something that just is a part of your job and finally get to it at some point? Or is that something that just doesn't resonate with you anymore? That's just not up your alley. Mm-hmm. And how can you get out of that? Is that something you can talk to your leader about and say, I don't want this to be part of my job anymore. How do we build an exit plan for that piece of my job? Or I'm doing the job of two people, and either we need to reprioritize or we need to hire a second person, which we think we're saying, but a lot of times we're not saying it. We're just feeling it.
What are we saying?
We're saying to our friends and family, I'm too busy. I have too much work. And my boss doesn't understand. But then we go to our boss and we say, I'm handling it.
Because we are putting on that Superman cape and we can do everything, and we're not going to cry, and we're not going to complain, and we're all the things that we tell, job seekers to do.
That's the word.
On the table, we don't want to be that person or thought of in a negative light. So yes. That's where the whole yes to everything comes in.
And you just said such an important word, which is complain. Mm-hmm. We think when other people come to us, we think they're looking for help and solutions. We think when we're going to somebody else, we're complainers. Right. And it's just not true. And yes, do I think you should go to your manager and say I'm so busy and I don't know what to do and I don't want to? No, of course not. But to go to your leader and say, I just did a self audit and I'm consistently working 60, 70 hours a week, and I can't continue to do that. So here's what I think can come off my plate. Here's where I think it can go. Here's what I don't know what to do with, but I just don't have time for it. And
I love that idea. I love that idea, Lauren.
Going in and presenting potential solutions. Mm-hmm. You're not going in as a complainer. You're going in and saying, this is not reasonable. Mm-hmm. Let's make it more reasonable. Here are some ideas.
9 times out of 10, they have no idea you're even doing half of the things that you're doing. So
the best CEO I ever worked for, who if he called me and asked me to do consulting work for the company he's with now, in a second, I would say yes. I would follow him anywhere. He was the one I was working 80 to 100 hours a week under. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And after we had both left the organization, and after I had done all of my boundaries work, and after I had exited and I was running my own business, I said to him, I was working 80 to 100 hours a week when I was working with you. And he said, no, you were not. I said, yeah, I was. He said, I never would have allowed you to do that if I knew that was happening. He said, when you came to me, you told me you'd been working on boundary setting, and you asked me for my help to redistribute a bunch of, and you already knew where everything was going. And that was really, really powerful. He said, but I would never, you made it look so easy. I would never have known you were working 80 plus hours a week. Nobody should have to do that. And in my mind, I thought I wasn't doing enough because there was always more to do. So if you come, and Paul, thanks for the backup.
Yes, Paul, loving it. Thank you so much for participating, saying all of these wonderful things. Because you are right. Always come with solutions.
And you don't have to have the solution, right? You don't have to know everything. You just have to know what's not working. To come in and broadly say, like, I'm really overwhelmed and this isn't working for me is not productive. To come in and say, these are the things I need to let go of, or these are the things that are bogging me down and I don't know what to let go of, or I don't know what to reprioritize, but this is the block of work that I can't get done.
Yes.
This is what's keeping me up at night. When you share that, that's a solution. To say, I know what the problem is a solution. And it's really powerful to go to your leader and tell them what you need support on. That is not.
And by doing that, you are setting boundaries, whether you know it or not. I mean, we talk about saying no a lot, setting your boundaries. And it's not so much saying no, it's just like you said, yes, and okay, these are the problems that I'm having and I do need help with them. Maybe we could do this. Maybe we could do that. Here's a suggestion to do this. They're still getting accomplished, but it's not falling on my shoulders. And you're helping somebody else at the same time to get the work done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think the baseline thing to take away from our conversation today is that this is going to sound mean, and then it won't. You, whoever you are watching this, you are not special. And what I mean by that is you are just like the rest of us who don't know how to boundary set, who think that the weight of the world rests on us, who think that everything we do is indispensable. You are just like the rest of us. And some of the rest of us have figured out how to manage to that. And where people aren't successful in not being special is that they isolate themselves. We get embarrassed. I was embarrassed that I couldn't figure out how to not work 80 plus hours a week. I was mortified. And I thought, I help all these other people with everything. I know how to solve everybody's problems. People come to me. They came to me and said, we need someone to manage finance for a little while. I was like, okay. We need someone to manage marketing for a little bit. I'll figure it out, right? And I did. I always figured it out. And so I thought, if I couldn't figure out my stuff, if I couldn't figure out my boundaries on my own, then I wasn't fixable. I wasn't workable. And that's what makes us not special, is that we say we're not fixable, we're not workable. This is just how it is. We'll be fine. We give up the opportunity to find joy in our work, to find boundaries, to have somebody be just like one step more clever about us than we can be about ourselves, to ask the right questions. With my own coach, one of her favorite things to say was, if you say so, because we create our truths, right? And I love that line too with my own clients. When I decided I wanted to go out and coach full time, I said, but you can't make money doing that. And she said, if you say so. And I was like, oh, you're right. As I'm talking to my coach who owns her own business coaching and makes a living off of it. So we do an amazing job as humans of denying ourselves, of limiting ourselves, of telling ourselves what we can't have, of saying to ourselves and each other, well, you don't quite understand. This is how this company is. This is how my job is. This is how my responsibilities fall. And that is only the truth as long as we say it's the truth. So unisolate yourself to make yourself a little bit, one step more special and one step more helpable in setting boundaries, is to have somebody else. And whether that's that you hire a coach, which I always think is the solution, whether it's that you hire a coach, whether it's that you have a mentor, whether it's that you have a work bestie, whether it's that you have a productive friend, a constructive friend. And that's really important, because a commiserating friend is going to be like, yeah, that is just how it is.
That is so true.
Having a constructive friend, having an accountability buddy, having, finding a mentor, whatever it is, getting your boss as your ally. have somebody else who you can say these things to, who can ask you the questions to challenge yourself, so that you're not always in this position where you have no boundaries and you'll be happy when you retire and this is just how it is. And every job you go to, this somehow ends up happening. Like we create how our lives go. And we have the opportunity to step outside of that. And the best way to do it is to have somebody else to help you.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining it, and gosh, being patient with the whole IT thing, and that was my end.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I'm sorry that happened. I hope people get to watch this on the replay. And I'm so grateful for the comments that we had, and for Paul and David coming in and supporting us. But yeah, I think hopefully people will leave comments afterwards that we can address in the comments, or send us DMs, or get in touch with us to ask more questions.
Absolutely. And Lauren, where can they find you again?
So the easiest place to find me is fineasatrap.com, or here on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And I also have a link tree, which if you can spell my name, Lauren Lefkowitz, go ahead and spell it. Don't add extra letters. Everybody adds extra letters to my last name. But my link tree is linktree.com/Lauren Lefkowitz. And all the ways to get in touch with me are there. My website, my LinkedIn, my Instagram, my podcast, which is I Could Talk to You All Day. Which is a podcast
she could,
about
and
leadership.
she's really good. So
thank you. Yeah, but it's been such a pleasure to talk to you, Christine. You're such a generous host.
Always so nice to talk with you and listen to you, and you are on my pedestal for sure.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for joining us, and we'll see you all soon. All right. Bye-bye.